Catch First and 12, Sundays from 10 to noon here on The Zone. It's brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from local farms and your favorite local brands. Macy's. Happy shopping. DJ PK and RSL head coach Pablo Mastroeni joins us. Pablo, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Pablo, I got to talk to you earlier this week, but for the radio audience, I think that we should repeat that discussion, which is obviously terrible because it's hard to recapture the discussion. But I was asking you about the first goal in the New England game. You know, it wasn't going well. You'd only earned, I think, 1 point in your last 4 league games. You had to have a win. You're scoreless at halftime, and you get a goal, and it's exciting when teams press, and Anderson Julio picks off that pass and rounds the keeper and scores, and the place goes nuts, and you're on your way to the win. But in the lead up to that, in the previous 10 to 15 seconds, you've been preaching defense when you come on here and team defense when you come on the radio. And can you talk about what it took for the team to force 4 straight negative passes where the team decides, hey, the safest thing for us to do, the revolution, is to pass the ball away from the goal? And they're basically backing up, and they switched sides once time in that, which you've talked about, and you didn't let them, go down the other sideline. So the culmination is the goal, but stuff you've been preaching came together for about 10 or 15 seconds there to set it up.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think the bigger picture, I think defending in any team sport is what represents a team, right? Because it's everyone doing what they really don't like to do, right? In particular, the attacking players. Everyone wants to have the ball, and that's joy. But the defending, and I think that's why, the old adage that offense wins games and defense wins champions is so spot on. Because it really requires everyone committing to the group and doing all the little things. And I think in that particular play, we dealt with a big switch. And one of the things I preach all the time is every time the ball moves, you must now take on a new position defensively. In other words, the most important thing for any defending team is starting positions. And that changes with every move of the ball. And so if the players are dialed in and engaged defensively, anytime the ball moves back, we're moving forward, and it's happening all over the field. And in that particular play, we dealt with a switch, and then again 4 negative passes, which means anytime the ball moves backwards, we're moving forwards. And so we're basically closing the space within our group as to where they can play through. And if we do a good job of that, then they look up and they don't find any space forward, so they have to keep playing negative passes. And then it's really Anderson being opportunistic and thinking the defensive game and anticipating the back pass and then having a great finish. But again, I think it's these kind of moments. It was that moment that we needed as a group for me to then be able to go in our recap yesterday, guys. I'm not talking about defending because I think it's cool. I'm thinking defending because it helps us score goals. It gives us confidence. It gives us belief. And when we do it as a group, we're a damn hard team to play against.
You made some changes, and I thought you were going to. Not that I really know anything compared to what you know, but it was obvious that I thought you were going to make some changes. And when you do that, particularly on the back end, how do you go about that in terms of seeking input and making sure the decisions that you make are a collective, that everybody would understand what you're doing, not necessarily that you need to please people, but making sure the decision is best for the team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think all those decisions, we do it collaboratively as a staff, right? It's not me going, this is what I want, this is what I want. It's really me talking about, okay, what areas can we improve in defensively and offensively in the different positions from the last game? And that creates dialogue. And we have dialogue amongst the coaching staff, and we also have, Kurt and Jason from the front office who sees it from a different perspective. And we get together every Monday and we review our games and we talk about the player situations, both contractually and where they are currently in form. And so there's always this beat on how the individual players are playing. And so then from there, we take it to the coach's office and we talk about ways that we can make our team better. And so obviously we made 6 changes from the previous game. And often, and that can have a positive effect or a negative effect. Negatively, it might affect the chemistry. But being that we were in such a rough run of form, that wasn't an issue with us. It was more about how do we inject this group with the type of mentality on both sides of the ball that's going to, spur on a good mindset, a good attacking game, a front foot game. Because I felt like in the previous couple games we were very lethargic, we were overthinking, so a little bit of paralysis by analysis. And then we had a couple injuries as well. Chicho was out, so Ando goes in. Barra was out, so Phil went in. But those two guys in particular, I thought had fantastic games. And so what hopefully is what you're looking for from a coaching perspective is that those players that didn't play due to injury, due to form, due to coach's decision, now have this I need my spot back, and the training week becomes more intense and more competitive. And so, but there's a whole host of factors to decide, but it's always done collaboratively as a coaching staff.
One of the moves was a change in goal with Gavin Beavers. Now, anyone who watched him play when you started him when he was 17 or 18 knew this moment was coming, right? At some point, he's going to be the goalkeeper. He makes saves. I mean, the shot-stopping part of the game is the part that comes to him most easily and most quickly. And he makes saves, and you're like, well, that guy just has to be a starting goalkeeper. You don't have to know a lot to figure that out. But there is more to it. You are asking him to play with his feet. And there have been times this year where I thought you were on the verge of making the switch, but, man, he'd give up 3 or 4 goals. And there's always other circumstances. Who else is in the lineup? He's had to play without the regular starting center backs in front of him. And so it's always this back and forth. So how do you decide now? And when you do, how do you handle that with Zach? Because if Gavin gets hurt, you're going to need Zach. If Gavin plays great, you could tell me that the club won't move him, but I just saw you move 2 guys for big money, and one of them way earlier than I thought you were going to. So that could happen, and you might need Zach for the season opener next year. If it goes poorly with Gavin, he has a couple of these games, you might have to go back to McMath in the playoffs. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but you're balancing all of this. How do you handle it with Zach? Because it can't feel good to be replaced by a teenager.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think the first goal we conceded against San Jose was a really soft goal, and it's one that, Zach, rose his hand and said, hey, that's on me. Unfortunately, when you're in a bad run of form, those moments cost you, right? And so and in these cases where it's senior pros that you're making this decision with, experienced guys that are leaders in the locker room, it was really important for me to take the conversation outside of the clubhouse. And I think the reason why is because I don't want the player personnel decision that I had made to affect the human being, because he's a leader in the locker room. He's a guy that has given a lot to this club, and I think it's really important for him to understand the thought process behind the decision making. And also the fact that this is not saying that you're not going to play again. This is just basically saying we need to give Gavin a run of games to see if we can inject this group with a different dynamic. And so, we had a nice dinner and we talked, and we were probably there for 2 hours and just, cutting it up. And at the end, it was like 2 guys that understand where everyone's coming from. And that, again, for me as a coach, it's hard to convey that my job is always to have the best interest of the team, especially when I'm talking to an individual about their life, right? And so it's really connecting with Zach and just letting them know that this is not an easy decision, hence the reason why we're at the restaurant. But I believe in you, and you need to be ready to go if something goes pear-shaped. And so I think that's just as – and again, I think that builds trust within the group when the decisions – because, again – my decision may affect their livelihood. And that's another big talking point about these things is don't let this decision affect your livelihood. You're in control of your life. You decide how you react to this. But I'm just saying that I think we need this for the team. And so he took it on really good. The last week in training, he's been really, really astute as far as training exercises and saying areas that he's seen over the course of the last 6 months that are, areas that we can improve in. And so he's been really, really proactive with his teammates, with the staff. And so, Again, and that's why I think the character of the person is so important when you're playing professional sports. Obviously, you need talent, but, character goes a long way to making it, if Zach goes out of the group, who's an established leader, established player, and responds in this way, how can any player younger with lots of experience behave any differently?
Well, if you're going to bench him, Pablo, did you at least pick up the check?
Of course, PK, of course. The least I could do. You imagine if I gave him the bill? That's taking away the whole experience.
That would have been awkward.
Hey, I got to go wash my hands. Bang, out the back door.
I'm wondering, with all these new dudes, how long or how do you get the process sped up to where you want it to be? Because time is running out on the season, and you basically have a new lineup or, a bunch of new guys that you're trying to incorporate. What do you do to hasten the process?
Well, that's a great question. And I would say, I would liken it to any relationship that you have away. So, for example, how do you speed up someone that you just met into loving somebody or into building trust? And the truth is that takes time. Right? We can integrate the soccer part real quickly. But for me, the game of soccer is like any other relationship, because you have 11 relationships on the field. And what you're trying to build, and what I think good teams have and what good cultures have, is a lot of trust. And that only takes time. Because, again, if you make poor decisions with the ball, immediately people start to doubt that you're playing for the team instead of yourself. The one thing I can say is that every player that we brought in are great people. They're great people that want to learn. And so, and I think in the last game, Javane played extremely well. Diogo played well. Lachlan played really well. So you have three guys that played well. And so I think it's going about as fast as it can. Unfortunately, Dominic left with the U21 Polish national team at a time where he was just acclimating to the altitude and understanding the way we wanted to play. So his integration will take a little bit longer. But to be honest, I'm pleased with how quickly they've come on board. And especially when you're in a bad run of form, it's really tough to integrate into a group. Right? It's not like it's a jovial, welcome type environment. It's like guys going, damn, we've lost the last couple games, man, and now we have all these new guys. And so, those three guys in particular have adapted real quick, and we'll continue to build those relationships and get those type of performances to where, hopefully in the next few games, it feels pretty seamless.
Brian Dunseth, kind of under his breath in a way that gets my attention, was super complimentary, which he isn't always, but was super complimentary of the way Brown and Lachlan interacted on the right side, which is odd when you consider they're both new to the group, they're both new to you, and now they're supposed to interact. And I guess you can say, hey, it's the international language of soccer, and actually, it just clicked. I don't know how else to explain it. Did you see those two interacting in a way that you thought that pairing on that side is going to make a difference? Yeah, no, I thought that was a bright spot in the group. And I'll start with Javane. I just think that his experience in the league has really helped him. And his decisions with the ball and without the ball, I thought were really, really good. And again, I think that's why I always talk about relationships and trust in soccer, because I think when Javane is making these type of decisions and executing the way he did, it gives Lachlan the trust to make these different movements to receive balls, knowing that he's going to get it, and or defensively knowing where to be because Javane's taken on such a good position. And on the night, the two of them were really good, and they'd trained together for the week leading into it, as that was the way we're going to probably more than likely go for the weekend. So they got those kind of understandings. But it's really about them and executing in under pressure, under the lights, and in front of the fans. And they put on a great show, and they did really well. And so I think Javane's experience and decision making in the back line, and his grit and his toughness has really added a little wrinkle to our back line that I think we needed. As a couple of Thunderbird graduates, you two, I guess, don't really need to talk about it. You just acknowledge 100 straight days of 100-degree heat in Phoenix, and it's just kind of, it doesn't need to be spoken about. There's just kind of a telepathy between you two.
I'll tell you what, I was just there last weekend, and it was like, got up at 6:30, and it was probably, 88 degrees, and by 9, it was like 96, and it just kept climbing. I think it got to like 110. But, the weird thing about Arizona is the longer you're in that environment, I feel like it's easier to acclimate. I think if you just fly in and you're there for 2 days, you'll never want to go back at this time of the year. I don't know. What do you think, PK?
I think you just have to hang on and knowing that November's coming, man. And
right.
then I think it's from November to like April. I think it's the best place in the world to be. But for now, it very well could be the worst place. But it just shows mental toughness, man. People from Arizona are mentally tough. If you lived in a beautiful climate all year round that you grew up in, I'm not naming any names, not Pablo. Don't get me wrong here. It's not like I'm talking to anybody who I work with every day. But, they tend to be softer. You know what I mean? Whereas you've gone through some tough times and you've persevered and you come out the end and you're better for it. It wasn't the soft 70-degree weather every freaking day of the year, And so it just adds to the toughness and it leads you to achieve things that you didn't think possible that you could achieve. Again, I'm not naming names, nothing like that, nothing at all. No, not. Don't get me wrong.
I can only imagine DJ's face at the moment.
I didn't grow up in La Jolla and Coronado, Pablo. Steel Canyon is 90 degrees. It's not 110, but it's 95. So.
That's great stuff.
15 minutes away. We had to go all the way to Prescott to get cool.
I was closer to the beach. I'll give you that. I had the geography on my side. It was 35 minutes, but yeah, you could get there. All right, Pablo, enough of this nonsense. You have a soccer team to work with. We will let you go. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, guys. Great catching up. Thanks.
Pablo Mastroeni, RSL head coach, Ryan Abraham, USCFootball.com, USC and Utah State. We're talking with Ryan next. Stay with us.
When it comes to high school football, KSL has you covered. Don't miss the Game Night Live Game of the Week.
It's week 4 of the high school football season, and you don't want to miss this week's matchup between the West Jordan Jaguars and the Orem Tigers. Stream the game online Friday starting at 7 on the KSL Sports app, or listen to the KSL Sports Red Zone at 7 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's Game Night Live, brought to you by UCCU. Love where you bang.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. PK, we have questions up, poll questions up on all the games this weekend. Well, all the local games this weekend. Utah State, BYU, the Cougars. About 150 votes in. 45% of the people think BYU's going 2-0. Optimistic Cougar fans liked what they saw.
I can buy that.
53% have the Utes winning and covering. 84% think they win, but only not all those folks are on board with the 2-touchdown spread. And USC, a 28.5-point favorite over Utah State. 62% of the vote has USC winning and covering. If you just go down to winning, well, that's 91%. And joining us now, covering the USC Trojans, Ryan Abraham from USCFootball.com. Ryan, good morning. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's a bummer we don't get to talk about USC and the Utes. It hasn't gone very well for USC lately, but at least you got the Utah State matchup, so it's a pleasure to be on your show again.
Exactly. And, I think we were all watching. The game got huge ratings. USC beat LSU. And I'm curious, there's for anybody who went to school in Southern California, as I did, we've all heard, University of Spoiled Children, USC, right? Ha, ha, ha. But when it gets to football, it's the boosters who are a little spoiled and who can get pretty upset pretty quickly when things don't go their way. And they certainly were upset with last year. How quickly does a win over LSU turn the mood among the boosters, especially when the defense only gives up 20 points?
Yeah, I think the morale of this team it's just a huge rise from just think about early December. There wasn't a lot of excitement for USC's bowl game, playing a ranked team in Louisville, and, Caleb Williams wasn't going to play, but they got some momentum by showcasing some of the younger players. And I think they used that throughout the offseason. And then all the hires that Lincoln Riley made, there was a lot of talk, and we had months and months of why this is going to be better, and I think like you mentioned, the boosters wanted to see it on the field, and they got to see it. I think even if USC loses that game, you have to feel good about the changes that were made. Guys looked bigger, stronger, and faster. They looked way more sound defensively. They were making tackles. The linebackers were making plays. The open field tackles was something we just haven't seen for years around USC. So I think the optimism has raised a lot. I think, the boosters, like you said, were pretty upset last year. But I think the entire fan base liked what they saw on Sunday night. Even if USC lost that one, I think they'd feel pretty good about their chances going into Big Ten play.
They bring in Lynn as the new defensive coordinator, right? That was established, and he has a good track record. And then I think they have about 6 transfers that start on defense, and not just transfers with experience, in a lot of cases seniors. So was it one or the other or a combination of both?
I don't think they did the star power thing in the transfer portal. Like 2 years ago, bringing in Bear Alexander, who was a former 5-star. Anthony Lucas was a former 5-star, and they got some good contributions from Bear Alexander, but Lucas they're expecting more this year. They didn't get those kind of big name guys like a Gavin Meyer from Wyoming, Nate Clifton from Vanderbilt, who put on 25 pounds. Those were the 2 starting tackles for USC in the game. So those weren't head turning signees. A guy like Easton Mascarenas-Arnold from Oregon State and his brother Achille Arnold. I think those are, key contributors too, but none of them were just these 5-star guys that everyone in the country wanted. I think it's more, those guys certainly helped. And I think Kamari Ramsey coming over from UCLA was a big part of it too. But to me, this is more about, you had good athletes last year and the defense was bad, and you have good athletes again, and there's some new ones, but the defense is way better. And it's just, to me, it's about scheme, about the coaching, how they were preparing. D'Anton Lynn, only 1 year in college, but he brings that NFL background. And what I was most impressed about is usually NFL coaches take a while to get acclimated to what, the college life is like, only having 20 hours a week with the players. But he just has a system that works well, and it's easily digestible by the players. I think last year you saw in Alex Grinch's defense, players, linebackers looking at their wristbands going into the sideline as the ball's being snapped, not sure what to do. Now they know what to do. They're just going out there and running around and making plays. And it's just one of those things that just some people don't seem to grasp. D'Anton Lynn grasps it. The players are getting it. They have a lot more confidence, and they're playing much better defense, at least through the first game, than what we saw any of the games last year.
Miller Moss, we don't have a big sample size. He's a junior. He was patient. He stayed there behind the Heisman Trophy winner. But you mentioned the Holiday Bowl game. He was 23 of 33, 372 yards, 6 touchdowns, and only 1 pick. And then against LSU, he comes out, and he's brilliant in that game. Again, about 370 yards and 75% completion rate. If he keeps doing this, A, it's USC, B, they're winning, C, those stats are huge. If you don't have the Heisman Trophy winner, do you have another Heisman Trophy finalist in Miller Moss, a guy who most Heisman Trophy finalists aren't that patient?
Yeah, he potentially could be. He's only had 2 career starts, both against ranked teams, not at home. And he didn't get to play his senior year in high school. I think this is going to be the first time he'll play in consecutive weeks, like start a game in consecutive weeks in like 4 or 5 years. So it's been a while for Miller Moss. So for him to come out there and do that against 2 ranked teams, it's pretty impressive. Now we'll see, a more overmatched kind of opponent on Saturday night. I'm sure he'll be fine. We saw him in like mop-up duty, and he had a couple touchdown runs. He's thrown a few, but I'm curious to see now where it's not going to be as, the DBs aren't going to be as tough. There's not going to be as big of a pass rush as maybe like an LSU or a Louisville, what he's able to do. But I think he's shown he can work within the constraints of Lincoln Riley's offense, and he's not going to be as the improv guy that Caleb Williams was. Is here's the play, here's your first 3 reads, he'll go through them. Usually somebody's open, he'll find that guy, and he's shown he's got a really accurate arm that he can get the ball there. So I think Heisman talk, just being the USC quarterback, you're going to be potentially in that conversation. But for 2 starts and both against ranked teams, play well in both of them and get wins. That's a pretty good start. It's a tough schedule, if he does have those kind of numbers throughout the season and they have a really good record, I mean, he's going to be mentioned in that for sure. It might be a thing where if he stays one more year, he sets it up for next year.
Yeah.
But, just being at USC, I think you have that potential to be a Heisman finalist.
How about the continuity on offense allowing him to flourish? Because I think they only added, they added more than one offensive transfer. But right now, there's really only one significant transfer playing. What's his name? Marks. Other than that, it looks like it's a bunch of guys who've been there. And I'm wondering how much that has helped the offense and will help them going forward.
Yeah, I think first in the offensive line, they tried the last 2 years to bring in transfers. It worked pretty well in 2022, and then last year they just didn't have the continuity. So now it's mostly guys that have been in the program and guys like Elijah Page, who's a redshirt freshman starting at left tackle for you. And it was huge to keep Jonah Monheim, who was their left tackle last year. He moved to center, so they have some veteran presence there. But I think, the core of the wide receiver group, they're all true sophomores. Zachariah Branch and that crew, they all came in the same recruiting class. But Woody Marks makes things go, the transfer from Mississippi State. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns in that game, including the game winner. So they needed him. But outside of that, most of the transfers were like wide receivers that are sort of like depth guys. But they bring back Kyle Ford, who had a couple of big catches in the game. He went to UCLA for a year from USC and then came back. So that's kind of an interesting one. But, yeah, for the most part, you have some pretty good continuity on the offensive side.
Were USC fans just giggling as Oregon struggled with Idaho?
I think they were just happy that USC, Oregon's had their number, just recruiting-wise and everything. And there was a lot of hype going in, and USC didn't have as much hype. So it's usually the other way around. But I think they were just happy that USC played well. They don't play Oregon this year unless they meet in the Big Ten championship game. But it's always nice that USC fans, they don't have a problem if Oregon's going to struggle. To see them drop a few spots in the AP poll, I don't think any USC fans cried over that one.
Do they know that Utah State now has Bryson Barnes, the pig farmer, who went down there last year and beat them as a member of the Utes with that last drive? Are they worried? Because the pig farmer could have an encore performance, Ryan. Don't you kid yourself.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we'll see with, what happens there. But everyone remembers that. Well, the one thing about this game is, it's a short week for USC. You could say there's a hangover effect. I mean, I was on the field in Vegas, and it felt like you just won a playoff game. I mean, they were so excited, and they were, I get it. I mean, it was a big win. USC been down for, a year or so, but you could see them overlooking an opponent like that. But just because there's a potential for Bryson Barnes to start, the guys that were on the team last year, the defensive players, I mean, they took it seriously that they were like 118th in total defense. The new defensive players that came in, they'd have to do extra reps, 118 of them, just because they knew they were 118th last year. They didn't want to be that. And, a guy like Bryson Barnes just ran all over them. I think it's going to get their full attention. So it might hurt Utah State that they have Bryson Barnes, even though he had a lot of success against USC last year. But I think that's something that could keep this defense focused because he had so much success against them last year.
How are you adapting to life in the Big Ten? How are SC fans handling that? What are the big storylines there?
Yeah, so far it's okay. I mean, they open Big Ten play against Michigan in the Big House, so that'll be a fun one. But, to come into the conference and everyone's talking about Oregon, not really about USC, and then USC delivers the biggest win for the conference, I think that was sort of helpful, kind of announce your presence. I think that was the worry that USC was not on a high going into the conference, and they wouldn't be the blue blood coming in from the former Pac-12. But getting that win, I think it showed, okay, USC is still up there. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with potentially, and try to get Oregon to take a little bit of a backseat. I think Oregon's still a way more talented team, and they're going to be fighting for a national championship, playoff berth, and all that. But I think it was definitely a good start to come in with that kind of feather in your cap. It's like, hey, we just came in and beat LSU. There's 2 big power conferences, Big Ten and SEC, and we just got to win against one of them. Michigan has a chance this weekend against Texas too, but I think that certainly was a good opening salvo from USC going into the Big Ten.
Ryan, good to talk to you. We do miss the Utah-USC games, to be sure. We'll take this, though, and thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you again down the road.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Ryan Abraham, USCfootball.com. Kevin Graham, longtime sports radio host in the market, will be talking NFL with us. The opener is in the books. The Chiefs and Ravens down to the final play. Jordan Love and the Packers are playing tonight. A full Sunday of action coming up, including Rams-Lions. We'll talk football with Kevin Graham at the top of the hour. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.
It's game week for the Utes, and the Zone is getting you ready for kickoff. After a blowout victory over Southern Utah, Kyle Whittingham welcomes in fellow Big 12 member Baylor to Rice-Eccles Stadium. Listen all week long for the best coverage of Utah football and your chance to win tickets to the game. Then catch the Ute pregame show this Saturday at 12:30 with a postgame show immediately following the game. Your home for the best coverage of Utah football is live on air, online, and on the KSL Sports app. This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. We are all set up for a big weekend of football. The NFL opened last night. We're going to talk with Kevin Graham about that coming up in our next segment. Football, everywhere football, PK, including Brazil tonight with the Packers and Jordan Love playing the Eagles. It's the best time.
Yeah. But last week was sort of the appetizer, and I think we just dive right into the meal this weekend. A lot of big games with the NFL starting. I mean, it's just so dominant. And what do? The first game goes literally right down to the last second. It's like the NFL, now I'm not saying they're trying to screw it up, but if they did, it doesn't matter. It just, the product is so awesome that people are drawn to it around this country and maybe even more so in the world. I don't know what the NFL is like in Brazil. I won't be able to watch it. I'll be at the BYU game, obviously, tonight, but I'm interested to see what the reaction is.
I think they're going to be playing in front of just under 50,000 fans there. I expect one game, one time. That people will love that. It'll be packed whenever they've gone abroad. I don't know that I've ever seen them go overseas and play in less than a full and enthusiastic crowd. I mean, there's always a number of, what do they call them? Expats, Americans living abroad, who will flock to it, a little taste of home. And plus now everything's on TV everywhere, so I'm sure there's people streaming games in Brazil, and they're like, oh, the NFL is here. Let's do it.
Yeah, I guess so. I wonder.
I'd be surprised if everything else than a packed stadium.
Yeah, but how many of those are Brazilians who really want to get into it?
Yeah, I know. That's a great question. Like long term, what is the growth potential for the NFL overseas? It's obviously easier for other leagues where, okay, that sport's already being played and there's familiarity with it, whatever it is. Golf, tennis, soccer, basketball, those are all global sports. Baseball, in a lot of not all of the world, but it is abroad in a lot of countries. So depending on where they go, it's already built in. And football feels like they got some heavy lifting to do in that area.
I would think so, yeah, but I don't know that they cared. How much do they care?
They get the full stadium, they get another TV window, and they get a big payday from Amazon. So it's a win. I guess if football becomes bigger in Brazil, then it's just a bigger win. I mean, I just read a thing that every NFL team is already worth $5 billion. The bad NFL teams, the weak brands, are worth $5 billion. And then you got the Cowboys, who are reportedly worth $10 billion now. So to your point, I mean, I'm sure they care because they want to make more money, but they're wallowing in it.
Is wallowing the right word?
It may not be. Would you like another one? And if you pick another word, will it get you in trouble?
Because wallow, would that be like floundering?
Maybe. I mean, wallowing is one of those words that sounds good, but I don't. You always bring those words up. I'm just supposed to say it now. These words go together. Just kind of like they're stuck in a bathtub full of cash and they can't get out. But you're in a bathtub full of cash. Who cares?
Would that be drowning in it?
No, the bathtub's dry. You don't want You don't want the cash to get all soaked in water. Yeah.
But I figured, with them, they probably have millions of coins, too.
It could be. It could be. Just a big pile of gold coins. They recline on it like some massive beanbag chair.
I think they got a better chance of establishing more of a foothold in Europe than they do in South America, but who knows?
Right. The NFL doesn't seem to lose, so I wouldn't want to bet against them. They seem to get it right time after time after time.
It just doesn't seem like they need it.
Oh, agreed with that. They don't need it. They want it. I'm sure they want to get to the point where every NFL team is worth $10 billion, not just the Cowboys.
Well, I think they will.
Seems like that's where it's headed. Especially now because they're going to let private equity buy in. So you got people with a lot of money who want to own 10% of a team, and they'll drive up the price and the value. So they know what they're doing when it comes to making money. There's no doubt about that. And as long as they give us games like they gave us last night, how can it go wrong?
Yeah. Right, exactly. The product is there.
It never got out of hand. 10 points, maybe it felt like it was starting to, and bang, the Ravens go down the field and score. So we got a game again.
Yeah, 10 points in the third quarter is nothing.
Right. You are in Dallas for the BYU-SMU game tonight. Pre-game at 4, kickoff at 5. Yak will be on the pre-game show here on 1280 The Zone. And so you went in yesterday, and you were telling us earlier, Cowboys.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
You turn on the radio, there's nothing else.
Yeah, and you walk through the airport. I've been down to Dallas, oh, my gosh, probably 10 times for work, including Fort Worth, obviously. And certainly that's a Cowboys market just down the road, basically. And it is so dominant here. And really in the Southwest, start to get into Arizona, it gets a little different. But that's a long ways away from here.
I was in San Antonio when my wife's grandmother was alive, and I borrowed the car to run some errand. I don't know what it is. And, of course, I flipped it on trying to find sports talk. Troy Aikman was playing in that era. And he had a syndicated radio show on the Cowboy Network. So he was on in San Antonio. I'm like, unbelievable. And you could tell he was already going to be good at broadcasting. Yeah, the Cowboys are everywhere in that part of the world. You can't miss them.
Yeah, and they're dominant. And you for all their, I guess you could say failures. They haven't won a title in a good long time. They've had some good teams. But Jerry Jones, and he takes a lot of abuse for not being able to get back to the Super Bowl, but he does know how to sell it by making himself available almost every day. Think about it. College coaches speak less than the Dallas Cowboys owner does.
Yep.
And I don't think they have a media member screaming last question after 4.5 minutes, right?
Can you imagine the PR person who stood over Jerry's shoulder and screamed last question? Look, Jerry, which I'll let you know when I'm done. That'd be the last time.
When he's right. So they know how to sell it, and it's just massive. And they were, when the league wasn't as good or as popular, I should say, not as good, but as popular, they were really good. And they had an iconic coach, and they had an All-American boy at quarterback. And then they've always been able to be pronounced at a time that the league needed it to be pronounced. I don't think the league needs the Cowboys to be good anymore, but you can argue in the 60s and 70s, the league needed the Cowboys to be good. And certainly in the 70s, I don't remember the 60s, but the 70s, they were good, right? And so they were able to build that national brand. And then I'm living in Arizona, and then after Staubach retires, they got Danny White, and Danny White is a legend in Arizona. So they were on all the time, and I could name you every single guy on their team basically when I was a kid, because even though I never lived in their city or lived within miles of the city, I knew their team because they were always out there, right? And Tom Landry, he just seems like almost an unimaginable figure in the way he drew publicity. He didn't drive publicity in the, the Bill Parcells or the Mike Ditka way, right? But the way he commanded your attention from the way he ran the team, and they did the movie about it and all that stuff. It was a great opportunity for somebody to seize national control. And at that time, the Cowboys did it. And now with Jerry Jones being so available at all times, and then they were really good, obviously, in the 90s to have another generation of folks get involved in growing with the Cowboys. And, the the stadium that was almost a dome, but it wasn't, and why didn't they cover the roof so God could watch them and all that. It just really fit at a time that I think the league needed it.
DJ and PK, when we come back, more NFL football. We will talk with Kevin Graham, and he's following the local college teams too. We'll get his take on these games. That's next, right here on The Zone.